So welcome and thank you for joining to Finlandia Foundation National's third annual National Sauna Week. Finlandia Foundation National, it's the largest independent source of support for Finnish culture and heritage in the United States, has declared the last week in February National Sauna Week to build awareness and appreciation of this aspect of Finnish and Finnish American culture. Sauna is a significant contribution from the small country of Finland and is worthy of recognition in the form of National Sauna Week. Foremost, the National Sauna Week recognizes an important contribution of Finnish immigrants to their new home in North America. During this week, we will feature in-person sauna events across the United States and online programs related to different aspects of the heat and steam bathing method practiced in Finland for thousands of years. Many people have experienced what is not an authentic sauna. It is important to get the right message out, and today's discussion is all about that. So today's program is an upper bench panel discussion with a special guest. Upper Bench has the standing slot on Sauna Week Monday, and here they are again. If you don't know, the Upper Bench gang is eating and breathing all things sauna. One part of its mission is to make a clear distinction between sauna and other forms of thermal therapy. So here are today's Upper Bench participants. Let's start with Eero. Eero is probably quite well known to the most of you. Eero is one of the founding members of the North American Sauna Society, and he runs it with an iron fist. What started as a frustration against all the bad heat boxes marketed as saunas here in North America grew into quite a life's venture for him. He has grown NAS significantly over the last couple of years, and he has been very successful in getting the word out. Sauna is truly his passion. Eero has a PhD in business administration and marketing, so for him, sauna awareness is also a business case. I would call him a sauna whisperer. Eero is also the president of Finlandia Foundation New York chapter and very involved in all Finnish in New York scene. The next we have Christopher Rice. He may not like this, but I call him Risto Riisi. Risto became a devoted student of Finnish sauna after accidentally stumbling upon the practice in 2015. He and his family have ventured all over North America, experienced good heat, and have used over 100 unique saunas. Their family was featured in the Star Tribune article called Rochester Sauna Evangelist Says Steamy Finnish Tradition Saved Their Marriage. They recently created a podcast called The Sauna Trail that documents their adventures. Then the entire family is into this venture. Risto created also the Wood Burning Sauna Facebook group that has over 6,000 members now, as a place to learn and discuss sauna construction and practice with other enthusiasts, especially those who grew up with it. He also shares sauna stories and articles at Sauna Digest and with random people in the grocery line. And the third person in the Upper Bench panel is Sam Wacha. I hope I pronounced his name right.
Absolutely.
His roots lie in Minnesota, but his story spans far beyond state lines. With a rich tapestry woven through both military and private endeavors, his journey is one of connection and collaboration. From his beginnings tinkering with do-it-yourself sauna projects to forging partnerships with US manufacturers, Sam's passion for saunas has evolved into a profound understanding of the industry. Whether he's laying bricks or advocating for education, Sam comprehends the multifaceted nature of saunas, from the technical intricacies to the financial considerations and emotional connections they foster. This breadth of experience forms the bedrock of his mission at Sauna Network, to empower individuals and businesses to embrace the authentic essence of sauna culture. So now I will turn the floor to Eero and Upper Bench. So go ahead, Eero.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. Yeah, first I want to thank Finlandia Foundation National. Like Anne-Marie, you said, this is, I believe, the third sauna week that we are experiencing here, and the Upper Bench has been involved with each and every one of those. And it's kind of a perfect win-win thing, because obviously I knew Anne-Marie because of the Finlandia Foundation cooperation way back, and when the idea came that the sauna week should be established, it was a perfect thing for the North American Sauna Society, and also now for the Upper Bench. So I'm asking Risto first. So how many episodes have we had so far? Is this like 29, 30 or something like that, I believe?
Yeah, we're coming up on 30. We just, our most recent episode was talking about the state of sauna in Utah. We have a series of episodes where we talk about sauna in the different states.
And yeah, and we have like a couple of are lined up now, and they're coming out soon. So there've been plenty. We've been actually working the whole weekend around sauna again. So what's going on with you?
Oh, well, like you said, the whole weekend's been sauna kind of consumed. My wife and I had a chance to go up to the Twin Cities and sauna with a friend of our show's, Walker, and then use a new public sauna. So we always enjoyed trying out new saunas. That's what we like to do.
Great. So Sam, what's going on with you?
Oh, similar to Risto, this has been a very sauna-filled weekend for all of us. I've been prepping my wood pile and taking sauna when I can squeeze it in between chats here. But I'm really excited about today's conversation here. I really want to thank everybody for joining us and tuning in. Fans of the Upper Bench, fans of Finlandia Foundation, and just fans of sauna in general. But Eero, let's introduce our special guest here today.
Yeah, and even I'm just going to repeat what Anne-Marie said before I do that. But so the idea is that we're going to talk about half an hour here, and Lassi, whom I'm going to introduce in a minute, is going to do most of the talking, but we're going to do most of the asking. But people, please put your questions to the Q&A, and we try to answer them, most of them after the presentation. But anyway, so Lassi Liikkanen is here with us today, and he has also been before at our shows. Welcome, Lassi, and some people know you. Thank you. Some people know you already extremely well, I believe, and not only because of the book that was already mentioned here, The Secrets of the Finnish Sauna Design, and today we are talking about the 4 generations of Finnish sauna, and we try to, Sam and Risto and me, we try to like mirror, oh, here he goes, mirror that, like what's happening in North America right now. But I probably asked this too many times, this question, but like Lassi, why the interest in sauna? Why are you so interested in sauna in general?
Well, I can imagine no better way to spend your time, particularly without any clothes on. So sauna is definitely one of the best places in the world to be.
Excellent. Excellent. So let's start without any further ado. So we're going to talk about the 4 generations. So are we going to talk about generations of people or generations of sauna?
We'll discover that very, very soon. So thank you, Eero. Thank you, Risto, and thank you, Sam. And also big thanks to the Finlandia Foundation National for providing this opportunity to give this somewhat exploratory address to the sauna-loving people all around the world. So cool. Greetings here from Helsinki. It's here about 8:15 in the evening. So I'm trying to kind of stay sharp and focused through the presentation. I guess the guys are going to wake me up if I start falling asleep anywhere mid-sentence. But okay, let's get going. So steam through time, the 4 generations of Finnish sauna. In this presentation, I'm basically gonna provide my interpretation of what that means. But I'll start by giving a few words about me and the project Saunologia that I've been running about 8 years now. Let's begin with that. So first of all, maybe how I grew up with sauna. So I think my kind of Finnish sauna upbringing in the 1980s was kind of usual at that time. So I lived in a rural Finland. I was a son of a chicken farmer, and for the first 20 years of my life, we had this kind of small electric sauna, which was kind of usual at that time, being already. Which was serviced by this red Narvi heater, not quite the unit you can see in the picture, but almost identical. So like most Finnish people, I don't really have any idea when I started going to sauna, because I've been going there all my life. But then again, my kind of life as a Finnish person and a sauna going person was pretty similar, or not unusual, for a long time. I kind of started my professional life, gave up farming in 2005. I started working full-time in university, spent 1.5 years at Stanford, which was kind of my biggest time of sauna starvation, because at the time I didn't really know any good places to go around to the sauna in Bay Area. Only locations we discovered were pretty bad. So the first thing I did when I got back to Finland after 10 months was go to sauna. But other than that, my relationship with sauna was kind of still pretty usual. I worked on different various research topics, including design, quite generally, and user experience in particular. And now, for about 10 years, I've been working as a design consultant in the Finnish industry, and more recently became also sauna-related author and a founder of Saunologia. And nowadays also some kind of sauna designer. My path to sauna design started almost 10 years ago when I started doing my first sauna design and build project, which then kind of grew out of proportions in a way that I first started to do this kind of documentation about it to the website called saunologia.fi. And little by little, things got kind of more interesting. My sauna was finished in about a year, but I kept going with the sauna research agenda, trying to figure out the kind of nature of good steam and perfect löyly and how you actually make that happen. I realized that the world needs another book, so I basically wrote a book about this secrets of Finnish sauna design, first in Finnish. There's 2 editions about it already. And then almost 3 years ago, released this English book, almost about similar content, but for a little bit different kind of a preface. And now I've been actually working on my next book. So that's kind of in a nice shape already. So I hope it will be available by the end of this year. This is going to be about sauna building. So I realized that there are still quite a lot of people who struggle, particularly do-it-yourself folks who have a hard time figuring out how to do small bits and pieces that are specific to sauna. So I'm trying to kind of help them with this upcoming thing. Good. Then, I said, for about 8 years, I've been also organizing my sauna-related activities around a small company called Saunologia, which has kind of a clear mission, is to help everyone from Earth to Mars to enjoy healthy, sustainable sauna experiences. So far, all of our work has been focused on Earth, but maybe one day also the Red Planet, who knows. Basically, I already have the designs for the Red Planet sauna as well. But Saunologia is mostly, simply put, sauna expert company. Biggest thing that we do is to provide freely accessible information about saunas, mostly in Finnish, but also a little bit in English, and having some interesting stuff going on there once or twice a month. Then we offer different type of expert services, sauna design, design consulting, even research and development work, and of course, talks and workshops. And good news for anyone interested in the stuff in the West Coast, because next June, I will have like a first try to organize a sauna design related workshop in California in person. So we'll be, we already have a date set with one of the SFN organizations, FAHA in Sonoma, Saturday, 15th June. And this proceedings will go to FAHA, but I'll be there with my whole family. So please come and see me if you are anywhere close by. That's about me. So let's go further. The 4 generations of sauna in Finland. This is basically a story that tries to pinpoint the most significant eras of Finnish sauna and why they turned out the way they did. And I think kind of my background is more technical. I've been trying to kind of understand the phases of sauna, about this kind of major drivers and technological choices or technological development. This is not kind of technology talk, but you'll soon hear. But this was my motivation why I wanted to try to do this. So the generations, kind of giving you the preview. So there are 4 generations, and naturally the prehistoric one, so one I call permanent habitation, private saunas, and then the 4th generation, which I call social by nature. So let's see. We'll begin with the ancient history. So this is a figure that I will be referring to later on, which is it shows development of Finnish population from well, very, very small numbers, very long time ago, and the huge explosion of saunas that happens in the 20th century. We'll get back to this by the time we've gone through all the generations. First, the prehistoric first generation of sauna. So if we go very long back in history, so this is kind of ultimate starting point for the Finnish sauna. Before this, there probably was never anything like a sauna in Finland. So about like 9,000 years ago, the first parts of Finland start to peak out after the most recent ice age. Before that, it was basically just kilometers of ice on top of Finland. And then we've been slowly rising from the sea. And the green arrow there on the right tries to convey the idea that Finnish people are expected to migrate from somewhere in the east. And with them, maybe, became the practice of sauna. Maybe it came over somewhere else. But the usual idea of how we think about the very first saunas in this prehistoric era is that these were like duck pit saunas, mostly dug underground. Very little wood was probably used, and I think they were mostly used for like everyday survival. Oops. So there was no wooden housing, and people, if they had any permanent habitation, it was very, very light. This is actually from early 1911, so this generation has actually survived for very long, even though trends have changed. We don't actually know too much about this prehistoric era. It's mostly based on inference, but we know that people were first living on a nomadic life. They were living in very small communities. They probably had multiple sauna sites along hunting and gathering grounds, and the number of saunas wasn't that huge. But then things change. The second generation of sauna. That's the time of permanent habitation in Finland. So historically speaking, that now we know some dates. We're talking about something like 215 to 2,500 years ago to something like 1950s. And during that time, people start to settle down. There are stable settlements, so the practice of sauna also becomes much more kind of, how to say, it stays in one place. Most of the people are living in countryside. There are, of course, also cities, although in Finland, unlike in most of other continental Europe, there are very, very few cities and they are kind of small. And the number of saunas goes from probably tens to hundreds of thousands of saunas within those time. So a lot of saunas already. And most of the saunas are smoke sauna buildings, and different kind of wood burning heat storage heaters, which basically work a little bit similar, but they don't kind of create the smoke sauna environment most people associate with this old sauna thing. And the biggest innovation, if you think in terms of technology, is actually the building itself. The log buildings particularly was kind of important that people finally managed to create some like quite permanent and not easily destroyed thing for living. Even though the wooden buildings were kind of subject to fire and lowest rounds of logs tended to rot down, but it was still replaceable and kind of permanent thing. And of course, this kind of generation, sauna had a lot of different kind of uses. It was used, of course, for hygiene, but a lot of agricultural different uses, ritualistic uses, medical uses. So it was really kind of a multi-function space. So last year at the Sauna Week, there was an excellent talk by Lassi Liikkanen, and she described very nice in detail about all kind of things that went on in smoke saunas. And I think the important was that the smoke saunas was a really kind of communal practice in a way that it required the whole village. I mean, Saya talked a lot about like the old women taking care of the saunas. And I think the important thing was that the smoke sauna thing, it was kind of short-lived. The smoke sauna doesn't stay hot too long, so you have to kind of organize everyone that they go in in pre-agreed batches. Sauna doesn't wait. You have to go in when it's done. And sauna was important. It was kind of thought about the first dwelling that was being built. Then you had much more buildings coming up afterwards, but it had a lot of functions for the people who on the countryside. But then we have to kind of remember that there was also a different sauna already back then. It was the urban sauna, and unlike we might think, not all of the urban saunas were smoke saunas, because already kind of in 17th century and before, there were regulations against having smoke saunas in the cities because they were fire hazard. And urban saunas were not so prevalent in Finland as in the rest of Europe, but I think they were like already kind of important things. They were upkeeping hygiene. They were a place for meeting people in good and bad, but meeting people nevertheless. And of course, they were also already a business. So someone was running them for, if not profit, but at least for profession, unlike in the rural setting.
Lassi, this is Risto. I have a real quick question about that. Because you mentioned the kiosks there, and that's a new piece of information from me. Were those like masonry type heaters? Do you know, back in the say the 1700s?
Yeah, actually, I have a few photos here.
Okay.
We'll get to them actually in about 10 seconds. So maybe we'll get a few words about them. Here are a few images. So this is Swedish path. I think this might be kind of more urban location. Then we have the very well seen image from the book by Aserbi. This is like a rural sauna somewhere in north of Finland. And here's an. So here's the image about the heaters or stoves. So basically, during the second generation, we had already quite a lot of variation. What kind of stoves there might have been. I think here. The stove that you are after would be the C or D model, probably. But A, B, C, and D are all different kind of variations of the smoke sauna stove, and they would be then. So these are the heaters without a flue. But then already in the cities, it's known that there will. But like 400 years ago, there were heaters with a flue. So in order to make them more fire safe. But of course, in the rural of Finland, these type of AB type of heaters were very prominent for a long period of time in smoke saunas. But then quite kind of one first wave of innovation, which is visible in the D and E, is the barrel heaters. First, they were combined with the smoke sauna heater and then create this kind of standalone thing that actually has a flue connector called barrel stove. But this was basically all. So this is where we end up with the second generation. So that there was already a lot of things happening, but basically these two things kind of go on their steady trajectories before something happens, and that would be the third generation.
So
Lassi.
is that in the second generation? are we thinking the kiosks moved inside the building in that second generation, or did that maybe happen in the first generation too?
Yeah, I think all the kind of best speculations about how things went during the first generation is that the kiosk was inside the duck bit hole. So, but there was just no house around it.
But for a tent sauna, at least for the sweat lodge practice in North America or the inipi practice, I think they usually heat outside, right, and bring the stones inside.
Yeah.
I was just going to say the same thing because I was lucky enough to spend a weekend in Bismarck, North Dakota, and it just dawned on me that the Inipi tradition is basically, yeah, like the picture that you showed there early on, you know, with the tent or the frame of a tent is basically exactly the same as the Inipi. And it makes me think if they were basically even the same people, I don't know, but the practice was the same, right?
Yeah. Oops.
So
Yeah.
that's it. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very, very hard to say whether it's part of the same tradition or whether this is another whether this could have been another instance of same things being discovered simultaneously around the world. That's not really known too well. Yeah. I guess my kind of personal interest, this has been particularly the first generation of the sauna is something that we know unfortunately very little about. Then once we move into the historical era, of course, even in the Finnish context, Finland, like shown in this image, Finland was for a very long time, it was part of Sweden. And then I think also our sauna scene changed a little bit when we became part of Russia in early 19th century. So that kind of influenced probably something, for instance, some of the public saunas, such as the Rajaportti sauna that still operates today, was probably influenced somewhat by the Russian standards. Although by the Russian, even though we were kind of close to the St. Petersburg, I don't think the Tsar really cared too much about what was going on in the very small domain of Finland. But I do recommend everyone to have a look at the very nice presentation from Saija Sileen from last year, when how she describes the second, particularly the rural, very rich rural culture of the second generation of Finnish sauna. But I would personally be ready to jump into the third generation, which I find the most interesting. Are you ready, guys?
Yeah,
We are.
we're ready.
Thank you.
We go. So let's start the space age of sauna and the third generation, fueled by kind of innovations and, well, actually like just basically two innovations that made a kind of radical difference to how the Finnish sauna then turned out, and how the third generation kind of played out. So although the humans presumably landed on moon in 1969, by that time we had already witnessed kind of most important sauna innovations, which were kind of becoming very hot stuff after the Second World War. Here you can see the kind of very first, well, there's actually no photo of the very first electric sauna heater, but here I like the two kind of important pieces of equipment that turned out in 1930s. So on the left, we have Castor, can be credited as the company that created the first commercial continuous wood burning heater. It looks rather odd by the modern standards, but that's anyhow, it was commercially available already before the Second World War. And also the first electric heater, at least when it comes to Finland, was also invented just before the Second World War. So these stuff, it already existed by 1939, when the Second World War began, but it wasn't really kind of in great demand. But the war literally fueled innovation. So let's begin the Second World War. And it doesn't begin with the Russian invasion, it begins with the battle against the body lice, which is kind of much smaller enemy. But so what happened in late 1939 is that the Soviet Union armed forces attacked Finland across several locations. It began a war that was relatively short-lived. and not very great success for the Soviet troops. So the ceasefire already began about like 100 days after the offensive began. Then there was this kind of more silent period until the Finnish counteroffensive and the trench warfare that started in 1941. So then in 1941, the attack vector was reversed, so that Finnish people, Finnish army started to press towards Russia or the Soviet domain, and that didn't quite go as planned. Although the Finnish attack was initially kind of successful, but it also landed new resistance because the body lice that was kind of prominent all around in the Soviet countries was suddenly also attacking the Finnish army. And what do we do when we're attacked by lice? We go to sauna. Unfortunately, important perspective, as I said before, is that during the second generation smoke sauna heaters, so immediately when the war began, and particularly in the trench warfare began, there were a lot of saunas were being built on the front using wood and using kind of old techniques, combining the log buildings and duck pit buildings to have saunas in the front. But the problem was that in order to get rid of the lice, you have to have very hot conditions for a long period of time. And that's not very good like a formula if you're trying to use a smoke sauna. So even though there were kind of instructions on how to build smoke saunas in the front lines, the Finnish army had to develop a new type of sauna, a mobile sauna called the lice sauna, to really stop and fight the lice in the station. So this was being developed in very early or very quickly since this new phase of the war began. So already by late 1941, the sauna was already in the plans. And the important thing is here is that, first of all, they wanted to build these mobile saunas, which could be transported with the trucks all around the place so that they wouldn't have to be stable because no one was kind of expecting that the trench warfare would go on for long. But it also meant that they needed something different from the old smoke sauna heaters. They needed a continuously burning sauna stove, and that was then developed. As we now know, the concept was not new, but basically what they had to do was to turn existing stoves for other purposes into sauna stoves. And here's one of the kind of early models. I think this is kind of maybe one of the prototypes. And notice also that this has all the kind of elements of a modern stove, except there's one funny thing about the unusual holes inside of the heater. And why there were holes was that there was actually this kind of ingenious system so that the same sauna cabin was not only used to bathe and heat up the personnel, but it also was used to heat up their gear because the small lice and their eggs were kind of living in the clothing. So the clothing also had to be heated up aggressively during the time that the guys went to the 80 degrees or like almost 200 Fahrenheit sauna. Their equipment was similarly treated, at least all the clothing. So this lice sauna was kind of a victory. So we actually conquered the lice. The lice never got very like epidemic, at least among the Finnish army, and it really helped to minimize the losses and casualties. And also quite interesting thing was that because actually everyone was required to go to the lice sauna. It was a kind of optional thing that you could go if you felt like it. Actually, there was also kind of very big procedure in getting some civilians back in the home front to also subject to the same treatment. But the important thing was that this new sauna concept, which didn't resemble the old saunas at all, was now introduced to hundreds of thousands of people. So you could say that this is sauna concept marketed unlike any other. So I think it was actually crucial that this there's happened to be these two things. There was the invention of the electrical heater, there was the invention of the continuous wood burning heater, and then there's the war, which started out quite a lot of different kind of developments. And that basically prepared the Finnish people for other type of era. Here's how by the way, elsewhere in the world, like within the Allied forces, they were using nice insect repellent called DDT to get rid of the same thing. No sauna over there. But Finnish people were, I think, got the better of it by using the sauna instead of DDT. So the third generation, we basically have quite interesting development. I actually realized that these are in the wrong order. So how I see the third generation is the generation of private and small saunas, which begins in 1950s and proceeds all the way to early 2000s. We have what kind of things that start to happen is that we start to have these kind of summer cabins in greater numbers. People move into big cities. We have industrialization, so there's a lot of like pressure to start creating products such as sauna heaters that people are going to buy. And of course, electric heaters and continuous wood burning heaters are kind of make your life easier. You don't that doesn't have to be an old crone heating up your smoke sauna all day long. You can do it yourself in about a half an hour or 1 hour max. And electric sauna makes it possible, electric heaters make it possible to kind of integrate saunas with any kind of existing house. So a lot of win-win situations there. So eventually we start to have these saunas built inside every new apartment by the 2000s, even the very smallest studios. And it happens so that in 50 years, we go from hundreds of thousands to millions of saunas. Our population doubles, but our population of saunas goes 10 times as big as it was before. And then we have these kind of small differences between the countryside, which has declining population. People did have smoke saunas. So smoke saunas don't disappear magically, but people convert them into the new generation of saunas. They are basically used somewhat to the same things, but a lot of the old functions of the smoke sauna disappeared. There's no need for them. And in the urban area, we have, particularly just right after the Second World War, we have a lot of like new saunas. But then something starts to happen, particularly for the public saunas. The public saunas tend to start to be replaced by the different opportunities to have saunas. For instance, at your own home or within the block house that you're living, might have a sauna. All, I think, thanks to this innovation of these new heaters. So here's kind of examples of the type of saunas that are being built. There are like these small electrically heated home saunas, and then this might be even older, but this type of non-smoke outdoor cabin saunas that we have were created in big numbers as well. So this is the third generation.
So let's
yeah.
talk about the third one for a couple of minutes here. First of all, do I recall right that under the Swedish rule, when Finland was under the Swedish rule, the Swedish government or the king tried to stop the sauna practice from the Finns, because they felt that, I'm just comparing to the fighting the lice and comparing this, because they thought that it was not hygienic, right? Wasn't that the reason why?
Yeah, I think there were several different kind of health-related arguments. I think there was a kind of one guy who was arguing that when the children are being brought into the smoke sauna, it will kind of destroy their eyesight, and that should be banned. So no one should go to the smoke sauna.
Interesting.
Among the many reasons.
Yeah, and Nils mentions in the Q&A that we also dealt with lice and logging camps in New England in that same way with saunas, that it was a way to kill lice in those logging camps.
Interesting.
Yeah, the whole practice wasn't really kind of invented. I mean, when it became apparent that there is a lice problem in the army, everyone knew what they should do. But it turned out that this kind of use of the smoke saunas that were already in existence didn't help because for a big number of people, it was impossible to maintain a high temperature for an adequately long amount of time. So that's why they had to revise the practice and also kind of come up with a new heater.
So
go ahead, Eero.
I was just going to say that so what happened that in the kind of the third generation, took kind of the community part of sauna away, right? If I understand right what you're saying, we're probably coming to that later on too. But so kind of the community aspects and that socializing thing disappeared when sauna started to go indoors and in Finland into people's apartments and houses and whatnot, right?
Yeah, I think it was kind of important difference that the saunas became smaller in general. For one thing, because the electric saunas had to be a little bit smaller in order because the electric heaters weren't that powerful. There's still kind of limitations that the electric heaters tend to be less powerful than the wood burning heaters. So that was kind of natural development. And also, of course, it also meant that when you have your own private sauna, why would you go to a public sauna? As long as you don't perceive large difference there. So, for instance, people like me, who were kind of born in the third generation, having kind of your easy access to your private saunas back home was for, at least for my first, I mean, I've always had some kind of appreciation for quality of saunas. Since like I was in my early 20s, I decided I've been selecting my gyms based on the kind of availability and quality of the sauna. But besides that, I think people were just happy that if they have access to this thing, so it became quite functional in its own way. But it was the function was pretty kind of straightforward and kind of limited to this kind of personal hygiene and maybe the kind of also the combination of different kind of exercise. And sauna has been very well established in Finland because I think like the first era when the Finnish sauna became once more better known around the world was in like early 1920s with Paavo Nurmi and the Olympic success. So he was kind of promoting sauna. So it was so the association that you need when you do sports, it's a good idea to also go to sauna. That was kind of probably kind of very well nationally known. But now, when you had saunas everywhere, like in I think every sports facility, or almost every sports facility and swimming hall nowadays in Finland has a sauna. So this type of like the locations for sauna kind of multiplied a lot.
So in North America, do I say it right when I say that the first and second generation were totally ethnic? You know, the first generation was basically Native Americans, and the second generation was the Finns, the Swedes, the Russian, and whatnot. So what we are actually dealing with here is the third and the fourth generation, which you're going to come to next.
Yeah, I think that you're pretty much on the right track because I don't think this kind of earlier generation never kind of existed outside certain like really ethnic black Finnish immigrants.
Yeah, we do have one more question about the third generation here. Wade Lit asks, what extent the availability of indoor plumbing for individuals brought bathing into the private resident experience.
That's interesting question. I think the plumbing thing, hard to really say. I mean, I can't really answer that question, but I'm going to give you another funny fact is that it took actually when people were building, people started building with like apartment block buildings. The first saunas, saunas for the whole house, were created already at least in 1960s. But it actually was still in 1970s when there were still individual apartments that didn't have a shower. They didn't have a toilet, but they didn't always have a shower. The smallest apartments. And then it was kind of fast forward about 30 years. And then we have even the smallest studio apartments start to have their own sauna, which is integrated usually into the bathroom. And it's awful place to be. But I don't really know. I think it's been kind of taken for granted that we've always had this type of plumbing, but I don't really know its significance, unfortunately. Well, should we skip forward to the?
I think we're caught up on the to the fourth.
Yeah, let's do that. So we also get to the end. So here was the parting impression of this third generation private bathing, then I think what we see think about like on this century is the kind of rediscovering the collective sauna and also some kind of connection to the nature. So this is what I call the fourth generation sauna. Sauna's collective well-being service. So and this is relatively new development, at least like I like to see it, starting from like 2010s. And I think it's being driven by the there's no kind of single technological driver in it. It's more about kind of because families the average size of a household or the median size of a household in Finland is 1. So people are most of the people are actually living alone. There are of course families, couples, things like that. But so by on average, people don't really have anyone to go to sauna with back home. So I think that's been kind of increasing the demand for communality, but also, of course, there's a lot about like wellness, de-stressing, because I think as people's jobs have changed from the industrialization to be more like information society type of work. And of course, there also kind of some like a sensation seeking in terms of trying to find new type of experiences. So there are a lot of drivers that are like coming from the people once more. And I like to think that people are also seeking better overall sound experiences, but that might not be the case so much as seeking connection with other people. And that has also seen that we've like the constructors have given up on building these very small saunas nowadays. Even the cities, at some point, cities were kind of demanding that the saunas have to be built. In order to get a like development permit, you have to build a certain amount of saunas with new houses. That's a bit more relaxed nowadays. And like new constructing favors larger shared use saunas. And because back in 1960s, they were building the kind of cheapest and the worst space, which is in the basement, was usually allocated for this kind of shared sauna. Nowadays, it's in the kind of penthouse level, which is the kind of premium estate. But that's the way it goes in a lot of like a new housing companies in Helsinki have their like penthouse saunas for like shared use. So I think there's kind of a lot of interest in these new type of saunas, and I think there are quite a few examples that I picked up. A lot of you have probably heard about the Sampa Sauna project that began already in 2011. This is the picture from the Sampa Sauna variation number 2. This is already passed, so they are in the third generation now with Sampa Sauna, which is this kind of a bottoms up sauna place where anyone can have a sauna anytime on the seaside in Helsinki. But it opened up in 2011 when people who had kind of got fed up with this existing small sauna, so wanted to find some other way to have sauna unconstrained by the buildings. And of course, 5 years after that, we have this architectural masterpiece called Löyly Helsinki, which is kind of a landmark in beginning the new era of public saunas in Finland. So we've had this like the second coming of public saunas is really not a huge thing in terms that there have been probably like less than a handful of new saunas every year since Löyly began, but it's still going, and there will be more saunas every year. And Finland is still a relatively small country that I don't think there will be ever like hundreds of new public saunas built, but there's still quite a lot of movement in that sense. So in fourth generation, I'm kind of expecting that we'll see much more shared use saunas. We have seen new commercial models, particularly in Finland, about the sauna restaurants. And a little bit, maybe if there's any new technological thing, there's the pellet burning sauna heaters, which have been utilized in several public saunas. But of course, we also have like maybe variations to this kind of private sauna practice, thinking about the saunas as everyday luxury items. And one interesting thing that I've seen in the past couple of years, there's this annual Finnish housing fair, and this year this exhibition took place in Loviisa, which is a seaside city. And when in the past, when new buildings were built, there was always this kind of integrated sauna when you have a small house. Nowadays, people have both the integrated sauna in the house and also a separate building, which also has a sauna. So I think this is kind of a new type of way that people are investing in this kind of everyday well-being and everyday luxuries, so that the luxury, so that you get a little bit different type of opportunities to enjoy sauna. So this, to me, is the kind of landmark of the fourth generation. And I think it's important to understand that none of these earlier generations have really gone away. Maybe the first generation is probably gone, but we do still have like smoke sauna enthusiasts who like to get smoke saunas as they were during the second generation. Then we have still plenty of saunas left from the third generations, even though like the people who build these third generation saunas are kind of gone. But then again, we have like a mix of these different cultures, and we have different kind of interesting thing. Like we used to have this Helsinki Sauna Day event about sharing your saunas, which was kind of popular before COVID. And I think it's kind of interesting also that most of the new saunas that have been opened up are by the waterfront, whether it's a lake, whether it's a river or seaside. But there's something very attractive, so the people like to go to these new type of saunas. So, but people are not. One thing that doesn't happen is that the Finnish people don't travel very far. So these new saunas tend to work best in the proximity of large cities. That's how it currently kind of goes. And so coming back to this picture where we started from, fourth generations, where the pace of development has been quite interesting. So in the third generation, we have like this huge boom of 10 times more saunas, and actually like only 60 years, like very rapid development of different types of saunas, so that everyone can actually have their private sauna, almost everyone. Of course, not quite everyone, but most of the people have their own saunas. And now maybe like looking again more to this kind of communal sauna practice with this fourth generation of Finnish sauna. And let's see, I don't really know how this will develop, but I'm actually, my kind of personal wishes or expectations from the fourth generation is that we revive some of the old customs. For instance, when it comes to some practices such as whisking, have almost disappeared from Finland, which is kind of a pity. But I think now there's much more interest in kind of reviving also the cultures, like the project that Saija Silen was describing last year about this Finnish sauna village, which has these old smoke saunas, is part of this kind of revival of the old ideas. But I think they will find their way also to this kind of fourth generation practice, which is not the same thing as the second generation. Even, I mean, you can visit the second generation quite in a way it was if you go to sauna page. But then again, there will be also, that's not for everyone. So I believe that there will be this kind of fourth generation of Finnish saunas also to come. Yeah, I think that's about it. What final says is that I think the fourth generation of Finnish sauna is going to be more like human-centered and thinking about what people really want. Because I think what went wrong is that we presume that if we can do something, we should also do it. So we managed to fit saunas into the size of old telephone booth, but that was really not to anyone's benefit. So, and I think it's good that we've kind of admitted that, and we will move on, maybe to the fourth generation of Finnish sauna.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lassi. We have a couple of, actually 3 questions here. Before we go to those questions, I just want to, on my behalf, we were actually recording yesterday with the upper bench, and we were talking about, like you said here, that the average size of a family in Finland, or was it in Helsinki, is 1. So sauna has, I'm sorry?
The whole of Finland.
All of Finland, yeah. Sauna has direct and indirect benefits, and direct benefits, we obviously we're not going to go there, but the health benefits. But the one thing which is you know, the mental benefits of sauna are very important. And now one issue that we have everywhere is loneliness, and kind of the fourth generation sauna is kind of an indirect answer or a solution to that. Do you, Risto or Sam, do you have any questions before I go to the questions from the audience?
No, let's grab some questions here. I think we've got a couple more that have just popped in here. Looks like, let's see here. The first one we'll get to Bobby Gray Eagle. In the early days of sauna, it seems to be a more spirituality piece to it. However, nowadays it doesn't. When did this change, among the Finnish population?
Yeah, very interesting question. I think if we look at like there've been a few books about the like beliefs in Finland when it comes to saunas. I think that it's kind of interesting because the Finland has the Finnish is nowadays pretty much like Lutheran country. So this form of Christianity has been the kind of dominant form for several hundreds of years. And what really happened is that when the Christianity took over Finland, it tried very hard to oppress all the kind of old belief systems. But similarly to sauna, there was resistance. But I think actually the kind of one of the most persistent forms of resistance was actually related to different kind of beliefs around sauna. So there have been a few books are written about how still in like mid and late 19th century, people still had quite interesting what you might call religious or supernatural beliefs about what happens in sauna. And I think these were also mentioned in Saya's talk. But I think then, these type of beliefs are still firmly in place during the second generation. But then I think with this third generation, the kind of new era, as I was kind of calling it space age in kind of intentionally, because things happen with this kind of when you have your private sauna, small box that's well lit and doesn't look like it like the formidable smoke sauna of the old ages. I think at the same time we lose a lot of those like old beliefs and rituals that were still going very well maybe in early 20th century, but they are basically gone by this third era. For instance, I personally, I was never kind of, when I was growing up, me or I don't think any of my friends had ever heard about anything about sauna gnome or any other sauna beliefs that were still very common and kind of educational material for children who were raised up approximately like 80 years before I was born.
Great, and actually Bobby Gray Eagle is a friend of mine from North Dakota. Greetings to him. So is Niels, who was talking about the flying fin. And then you wanna, Sam, go ahead.
Well, let's see here. I am going to butcher that pronunciation there, Eero. Why don't you read the one from John there?
Has there been a decline in kesämökki saunas used by urban families or individuals, especially for Juhannus, which is midsummer celebration?
I don't think so. I think the use of kesämökki summer cabins has remains pretty high, particularly I mean the COVID re-emerged during COVID. The summer cabins had their value probably doubled in just a year. Since the COVID ended, there have been more people have been selling their cabins once more. But I think yeah, I think the COVID was really kind of good thing for summer cabins because, of course, some of the people, the summer cabins, we have about 600,000 summer cabins in Finland. So, and those kind of require some amount of effort in order to keep them working. But I think since COVID, people have there have been more people who've gotten back to this like cabin life. So I don't think that has really happened. So most of the cabins, particularly during this Juhannus, if you want to rent a cabin for Juhannus that's on the seaside, you're too late already now.
Mm-hmm. Great, and then Cass says that Saya Selin's presentation that Lassi has referenced is available at the Finlandia Foundation YouTube channel, which is obviously youtube.com/Finlandia Foundation National. Great. I think any further comments or
I do see one comment here that's interesting from Caroline. And Caroline, I apologize if I mispronounce your last name, but Kajarine. But she's from the Thunder Bay, Ontario, and she said many families there have both electric indoors and wood-fired outside, like you mentioned, Lassi, and since the 90s, and not just people from Finland, but there was such a strong Finnish influence that it's non-Finnish people as well. And they have had a restaurant sauna combination for generations there. And I believe that's Kangas Sauna in Thunder Bay.
And it's Kajorinne. Why did you pronounce it right?
Sorry.
All right. I think we're going to wrap up because we're already over time. So I believe we have to, unfortunately, give it back to Anne-Marie. But at this point, I thank you all. I think I find this very interesting, and this gives a lot of thought about sauna in North America, which we obviously were very interested in.
Okay.
Thanks everyone for coming in. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Lassi.
Thank you, Lassi.
Yeah, thank you.
So on behalf of Finlandia Foundation National, I thank our special guest, Lassi Liikkanen, and our upper bench gang, and I hope to see you guys again next year. I think that you have a standing slot there for
Thank you. We will be there. We will be there.
Thank you all for being part of the program. It was great to have Lassi and upper bench here, and let's listen to this comedic music that has been specifically made for this week.
Hey, while we're doing that, one question that was posed here that didn't show up. Why is it consistently? I think this is Sam and for Risto to answer. Why is sauna called a sauna in the US or North America? Is there a reason for it? It's just pronunciation. If you read S-A-U-N-A, that's
Well, I would probably, first of all, I'm going to blame it on the English, because we get all weird pronunciations from them and they can't seem to pronounce anything right in a foreign language. But if it's not their fault, then perhaps it's because when it became popular, it wasn't because of Finnish people sharing the practice. It was because of newspaper articles about the Olympics or this new practice. And so then people were learning about it just from reading it. And if you read it in English, your first guess is going to be that it's like the word fauna, which is sauna. And then once that catches on, it's really hard to shift.
good point. Thank you.
I agree. Yeah, and since I've moved around a lot, I've heard it pronounced every different way you could imagine. So luckily, I've got a good ear for accents. But hey, it's as long as you're getting in there, I don't care what you call it.
And as long as you don't call it bastu. Sorry, I had to say it.
If you wanna make friends in Finland, you gotta put on your birthday suit and let your hair down, cause we don't play around. We've been chilling in the heat, listening to the sound of the kiuas. So throw in some löylyä lisää. Tervetuloa saunaan sisään. Get your butt on the seat. Keep your distance.
Please let me show you how my Finnish heart rings. This is my nature, just hear the kiuas sing. In a sauna there's no ego, we're all the same. If it feels too hot for you, don't be afraid. So join me, drop your gloves and grab the löylykäyhä. Ilo savusauna, find your peace, find your rauha. In the sauna. Sauna, in the sauna.
Let's go through the sauna basics. Let's face it, it sounds kind of crazy. Cue us, we throw water on the rocks. It can be electric or heated with some logs. Lulu, that's the steam coming up. That's the spirit of sauna.
Did you mean sauna?
Yeah, well, call it what you want. Vanya.
Hammam, Korean spa.
Please let me show you how my Finnish heart rings. This is my nature, just hear the kiwa sing. In a sauna there's no ego, we're all the same. If it gets too hot for you, don't be afraid. So join me, drop your clothes and grab the lulukoha. In our savu sauna, find your peace, find your rauha. In the sauna, in the sauna, in the
As we sit
sauna.
in the heat and you're sitting next to me, we're gonna keep it real, say it like it is. Finns take a sauna almost every day. There are no rules, just do your way.
Please let me show you how my Finnish heart rings. This is my nature, just hear the kiwa sing. In a sauna there's no ego, we're all the same. If it gets too hot for you, don't be afraid. In a sauna,